الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا اللهم زدنا علما إنك أنت عليم الحكيم اللهم اجعل هذه المحاضرة حجة لنا لا حجة علينا يا رب العالمين أما بعد. As we continue in Zaad Al-Mustaq'ni with Imam Al-Hajjawi rahimahullah ta'ala as it relates to the fiqh of Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal rahimahullah. We made it to the chapter or the part we were in Bab Salat al-Jama'ah, congregational prayer. We were in the chapter of congregational prayer. Last week we read, or the week before, we read through part of it. But inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to read through that portion again to make ithbat, to make sure that we understand it, inshallah ta'ala. قال المصنف رحمه الله.
Would you like to see my rope?
Nice. طيب. فصل في الأعذار المسقطة للجمعة والجماعة. Some of the excuses that can be used for a person to leave off Jum'ah and the Jama'ah. Jum'ah prayer and the Jama'ah, congregational prayer. قال المصنف رحمه الله. And so he starts off this portion by saying, يُعْذَرُ بِتَرْكِ جُمْعَةٍ وَجَمَاعَةٍ مَرِيدٌ. So now, Imam Al-Hajjawi rahimahullah, he mentions excuses or reasons why a person can leave off, meaning this is talking about the men. He's talking about the men. Why the men can leave off congregational prayer. Fine. Before we mention that, does anyone know of any of the wisdom behind congregational prayer? What's the wisdom for the men having congregational prayer? Why the men? Why do you think?
Outside of, I guess, strengthening their brotherhood.
Strengthening the brotherhood. Mumtaz. What else? Anything else?
Them being the leaders of the household, it would be important for them to be able to, I guess, relay that.
Right. Oh yeah, that's a nice reason. So if we look here, what we covered previously is that Salatul Jum'ah and the congregational prayer is obligatory for the men, right? It's obligatory for the men. And he says, however, وَيُعْذَرُ بِتَرْكِ جُمْعَةٍ وَجَمَاعَةٍ مَرِيدٌ. So now he's going to mention a series or a group of people that is permissible for them. And what we're going to learn about this here is the mahasin al-sharia. How the sharia of Islam, it doesn't leave any rock unturned. In other words, it covers every aspect of a person's life and takes into consideration everything that a person may go through in their life. So when we look at this chapter here, it says, وَيُعْذَرُ بِتَرْكِ جُمْعَةٍ. A person can leave off the Jum'ah prayer, a man can leave off the Jum'ah prayer and the congregational prayer if they are sick. If a person is sick, then it is not obligatory for that person to go to Jum'ah prayer. Most people are aware of this. Like, وَمُدَافِعٌ أَحَدَ أَخْبَثَيْنِ. And if a person has to urinate or defecate, then they can also leave off the congregational prayer. They can also leave off the congregational prayer. طيب. وَمَنْ بِحَضْرَةِ الطَّعَامِ مُحْتَاجٍ إِلَيْهِ. If a person is served food and they're about to pray Jumu'ah or congregational prayer, they can leave it off. They can leave off the Jumu'ah and congregational prayer, as some of the ulama or some of the scholars of Islam even mention that they can take as long, يَأْكُلُ حَتَّى يَشْبَعْ, eat until they are full or until they're filled. And this is based on a narration of Anas. This is based on a narration of Anas or Khabar li Anas ibn Malik. طيب. We also find that another group, so right now so far we have the sick person, and we have the person who has used the bathroom, and then we have the hadarat al-ta'am. If a person, if food comes and they can leave off these things, right? And then the next one is khaifun min di'a malihi. If a person is afraid that they will lose their wealth. Now let's think about a scenario. What does that look like? Huh?
You talked about like if
We spoke about this.
right,
You
if
said
you
that-
work at a bank, right? And
We say anything about working at a bank.
No, you said.
well, if you work saying you got to drop the.
Let's say he has money. Let's say he has money with him, and he left his money in the car, and he wanted to go in to pray. You know, for example, out here in the streets, he left a big bag of money in the car. In this case, it will be permissible to leave off the congregational prayer in the Jumu'ah and go handle, protect your wealth. طيب. أو فواته أو ضرر فيه أو موت قريبه. And let's say, for example, he has a companion, and that's very sick, and they're in a car, and they're praying congregational prayer, and they know that if they leave, if he leaves his companion, perhaps his companion may die or something like that, it's permissible to leave off the congregational prayer and the Jumu'ah prayer. Right? It's permissible to leave off the congregational prayer and the Jumu'ah prayer. Oh, ala nafsihi. If a person fears for himself, let's say, for example, is in a bad neighborhood, and he knows that if he goes there, he has beef with someone over there. And if he goes into that neighborhood, it's going to be a problem for him. So in this case, it's permissible for him to leave off the congregational prayer and the Jumu'ah. And it says, oh, sultanin. And perhaps the government is looking for him. This is talking about in the land of the Muslims, for example, he's afraid that someone's going to get him. So in this case, it will be permissible to leave off the congregational prayer and the Jumu'ah prayer. And it says, oh, mulazima ti gharimin. Let's say, for example, you owe him some money, right? He owes you money, right? He doesn't have the money. But he knows if he sees you, you're going to press him for that money. So in this case, it's permissible for him to leave off the congregational prayer and the Jumu'ah because he knows that if he sees you, you're going to be on his top for that money. And he doesn't have it. Now, there's a difference if he had the money and didn't pay it, that's something different. Then that person is sinful. Well, is that clear? There's a distinction between the two. You owe him money and you don't have the money, and when he sees you, he's going to keep asking you for it, but you know you don't have it. That's one case. In this case, you can leave off the congregational prayer and the Jumu'ah prayer. But if you have the money and you choose not to give him the money, then in this case you are sinful. واضح؟ طيب. أو من فوات رفقته أو غلبة النعاس عليه. And likewise, if a person is sick, if a person is sleepy, he's so tired that if he goes to Jumu'ah or to the congregational prayer, he may fall asleep on the way or something like that. He's dead tired. In this case, it is permissible to leave off the congregational prayer. What that doesn't mean is, oh man, well, Fajr is getting earlier and earlier, so I'm going to just stay up and just oversleep for Fajr because I know I'm going to be too tired. That's not what that means. No.
The Isha prayer could be delayed, am I correct?
Can the Isha prayer be delayed?
No, but the question that I want to ask is, like you said, the sleeping, you're tired, sleep, you fall asleep before the Isha comes in, and your Zoh's wakes you.
You shouldn't sleep between Maghrib and Isha. That's a time that a person should not sleep between Maghrib and Isha.
because
I mean, but if you can't, I'm just saying, if you have to sleep, there's no controlling it.
You sitting there, you waiting for Isha to come in, you fall asleep.
Like,
Well, it always wakes you up for Isha, but you just there tell you can't get up. It's kind of difficult. But you wake up for Isha, you know, later on before the time is out, and you pray. From what I heard was sometimes you should not wake the person. Then I don't
you shouldn't wake the person.
Yeah, I'm asking. That's the question. Should you?
Sure.
Should you not?
Yeah, Sheikh. Delaying Salatul Isha.
You sleep.
This is my
okay. All right.
Delaying Salatul Isha from the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam ila muntasif al-layl, to the middle of the night. The middle of the night is calculated by Salatul Maghrib and the time that Salatul Fajr comes in. Whatever half of that is considered muntasif al-layl, or the middle of the night. A sunnah is to delay it if you can. But the Prophet ﷺ, they did not do it because people will be tired and so on and so forth. But it's better if you're able to delay it. Now, if they're having congregational prayer at a particular time in the masjid or so on and so forth, then you should go to the masjid and pray that congregational prayer. However, if you miss that prayer because you are asleep, nu'az, ghalabatul nu'az means that you are overcome by sleep, then in this case it's permissible to leave off the congregational prayer if one is overcome by sleep. It's not that you are intentionally doing that, but rather you are overcome by tiredness. In this case, it will be permissible for you to delay it. But not delay it outside of its time. Now, some of the scholars differ with regards to, does Salatul Isha go all the way up until Fajr la? Fiha kalam. There's a lot of kalam from Ahlul Ilm, from the scholars of Islam, as it relates to that. Tayyib. Another way in which a person can delay the Salat, leave off the congregation, is that the rain is affecting them. If it's raining hard, and yuballil thiyab, as they say, and that it drenches the garments, then in this case it's permissible to leave off the congregational prayer.
Not to go backwards, but before you get too far, I wanted to ask you. Now, you said it's permissible for the one who's really sleepy overcome the Mr. Kant for Jumu'ah, right? What about, is there a punishment for that person? Because a lot of times you see brothers and they come in and they obviously sleep and they falling asleep in Jumu'ah. Is that? I'm sure
is it a punishment for them for falling asleep in Jumu'ah? Shuf Yashir. If they can't, ghalabat al-nu'as, this means they are overcome by sleep. That's not choice. It's a difference if the person comes into Jumu'ah with the intention, I'm going to pull out a pillow and go to sleep. That's the difference. If a brother is sitting during the khutbah, he's nodding off, inshallah, there's no punishment in that shit. Right. So we're going to start a new chapter. The new chapter is dealing with this, but in more detail. It's called Bab Salatul Ahlil A'adhab. The people of excuses. Who are they? In general, there are three groups of people that have excuses in the Salat. Now when we're talking about people of excuses in the Salat, meaning we're not talking about Jumu'ah and Jama'ah, we're talking about in general. In general, there are three groups of people that have excuses with regards to the prayer. Does anyone know who those people are?
Regards to the prayer, what you mean when you say regards to the prayer?
The way a person prays. There are three people with excuses.
The injured, like if you have.
So a person is sick.
Right.
All right, that's one. Who else?
the elderly, the older person.
Yeah, they can fall into the sick.
Sickness. Right.
Kind of. Who else?
Let's see, you said.
I mean, there's no excuse for being elderly. When you're elderly, you still have to pray. Your salat doesn't change unless you are injured. Well, then, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows you to live to see 100 years of age, and you still have all of your faculties, meaning you can walk, you can bend, go down in sujood and all that, you are still obliged to praise everyone else.
Okay, So maybe I was
So there's no
misunderstanding
age
the
limit.
question, because you said with how you pray, so that's why I was figuring
Right.
the elderly. or
So
something.
but it goes with being sick. There's something wrong with you at that point. Not just being elderly, right? There's some elderly people that are fully functioning, right? Now, huh?
Stuff is escaping.
Right. Who's the next group? Does anyone know? The women? La. La.
You said, okay.
The people of the Salat that have excuses in their Salat. So the first one,
Oh, the person that's insane.
they don't have to pray, period.
Okay, got you, okay.
We're talking about people that have to pray, knowing that they have to pray. They have certain exceptions in the Salat, if you will.
Is this physically in the salat or excuse from the salat?
We're talking about in the Salat. Not, for example, we finished praying, we finished talking about people for excuses for leaving off the congregational prayer in the Jummah. We're not talking about that now. Now we're talking about people who can act, there are certain excuses that they have within the Salat due to certain conditions.
So is that not the same person? They're not the same? Is that considered as sick?
So we already mentioned the sick. That's number one. So the first one is the sick. Right. Who else? Who else besides the sick? Somebody that's disabled? So they fall into the person being sick category.
So sick and injured, they all in there.
Yeah, sick, injured. Huh? I'll give you another. The second one is a person that is traveling. A traveler. They have certain exceptions and excuses that can go with them. Right. The third group is a person that is khaif, a person that is fearful, afraid. A person that is afraid. Right. Really quick, I want to go back to the issue of leaving off Jumu'ah and congregational prayer. This was something I wanted to mention. So some of the scholars mentioned about leaving off Jumu'ah and congregational prayer. It's the one, Lo Musta'jiran li hifd al-bustan. And they use an example that is relevant to their society, right? If you look at the example, it's something that can be applicable in our society as well. And it says here, it says, Lo Musta'jiran li hifd al-bustan. If a person is being paid to watch something, and if they leave their job or whatever they're being paid to do, they are afraid to leave there because they won't get paid, they'll lose their job, so on and so forth. In this case, it is permissible for them to leave off the congregational prayer or Jumu'ah. Well, that's very important because we have brothers and sisters here that may not, you may take a job, a brother may take a job, and he believes that, or maybe he won't take a job because he may have to work on Fridays. And because he has to work on Fridays, he will not take this job to take care of his family. When we have scholars in Al-Islam, especially this is in the past, they mentioned the permissibility of leaving off the congregational prayer if you're working, if you have something. And it goes back to those categories. If you leave, you're going to lose your job. Who's going to take care of your family? Now, obviously, the goal shouldn't be to work on a job where you have to work on Jumu'ah. The goal should be for Muslim men, when you work on your job, you let them know, listen, I'm Muslim. On Fridays, I'm either going to take a longer lunch. I'll either come in earlier or leave later. But this is something that I have to do for my religious practice. And Muslims, we have to be forthright with this information. You can't, I'm going to hide that I'm Muslim and want to get in the job, and then I'm going to just let these people know, listen, I'm Muslim. It is what it is. I got to pray too. And a lot of times we find brothers, they're afraid. They're afraid to let people know that they're Muslim, number one. And number two, when it comes to the Salat, they're afraid. Like, listen, I need a room to pray in. If not, pray in the middle of everybody. I mean, I'm not saying do that, but, you know, tell me you need somewhere to go pray. It's okay. Really. It's not a big deal. Huh? As they say, closed mouth don't get fed, right? If you want to be able to practice your religion, open your mouth and let the people know, listen, I need to pray. I pray for, you know, for the Lord, I'm going to have to, you know. And then they say, well, you know, some Muslims, oh, I don't want them to know how to pray. Listen, these non-Muslims take 100 smoke breaks all day. Smoke breaks all day. Sahwallah. Smoke breaks all day long. Smoke a cigarette all day. And they be going how long? 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. At any event, I wanted to mention that because that's something that's relevant, something that's very important, and it's an issue that it plagues some people. And perhaps it prevented people from taking jobs that they could have taken because they're afraid. But at the end of the day, it is permissible. Obviously, that's not the goal. The goal shouldn't be to work on Jumu'ah, but if you have to, you have to. And obviously, you want to ask your employer or let your employer know that, listen, I need this time off on Friday, at least for a few hours to go pray and go back to work, inshallah ta'ala. Now, going back to Bab Salatu Ahlul A'dhar, there are 3 groups of people here. The first one is the Murid, the one that is sick. The second one is Al-Musafir, the one that is traveling. And the third is Al-Kha'if, the one that is afraid. Now, we're going to talk about this, inshallah, in some detail about what are these people are supposed to do? What are they supposed to do? Right. Talzamul marida salatun qa'iman. If a person is sick, how should they pray? This is a question.
Depends on how they're sick, though.
Yeah,
It's a general question.
Depends on their sickness.
If a person comes in here and says, listen, I'm sick.
If he's not able to.
Just listen to the question first. We're not doing no ifs or nothing. They just come in and say, I'm sick. You see them moving around, bending, whatever. They just say, hey, I'm sick. How are they supposed to pray? What's the rule of thumb?
I mean, if they're able to move around like the rest of it, I would believe that they got to pray like the rest of it.
Ahsant. So then the rule is, just because you're sick doesn't mean you can't stand for the salah. Is that clear?
Right.
Just because a person is sick, it's not a pass to leave off pillars of the prayer. Right? That's the rule of thumb. The only time it's permissible to leave off a pillar of the salah is if you are unable to fulfill or do that particular pillar. Is that clear? Right. So if we look at this, it says, Talzamul Murid Salatul Qa'iman. So then it is incumbent for a person that is sick to pray standing up. فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَقَاعِدًا. And if they are not able to stand, then they should pray sitting down. Ahsant. فَإِنْ عَجَزَ. Now what if they can't sit down? Then what?
They can't stand.
What if they can't stand and they can't sit down?
They can't stand or sit down.
You can lay down.
Yeah.
They lay down. Ahsant. فَإِنْ عَجَزَ فَعَلَى جَنْبِهِ. And if a person can't sit and they can't stand, then they are to pray laying on their side. Like, some of the scholars say, well, which side? The right side, the left side, this, that, the next. What do they face to the end of it? Huh? If a person cannot stand and cannot sit, then they should pray laying down. فَإِنْ صَلَّ مُسْتَلْقِيًا رِجْلَهُ إِلَى الْقِبْلَةِ صَحْ. So let's say, for example, a person is praying laying down with their feet facing the Qibla. He said, this is sahih. This is correct. If a person, let's say, for example, they can't move. They're laying down, they're in a hospital bed, whatever, but their feet is facing the Qibla and they're facing that way. The salah is still okay or correct, inshallah ta'ala. وَيُومِئُ رَاكِئًا سَاجِدًا وَيُخَفِّضُهُ. And this person, when it comes to them making a a ruku', then they move slightly. And if they're going to make sujood, then they move slightly, a little more than that. Does that make sense? The key is that each movement has some form of separation between them. Is that clear? Each movement must be different from the previous movement.
For example, you might go here and then here.
Let's say they can't sit, they can't stand, and all they can do is lay down, but they can still move a little. So their movement, they're going to move accordingly. But their movement is going to be slightly, for example, for ruku', they're going to move one way. For sujood, they're going to move another way. Well, how they move depends on that person and their condition. But yeah. فَإِنْ عَجَزَ أَوْ مَعَ بِعَيْنِهِ. And ikhwan, brothers and sisters, this also shows the importance of the salat. The scholars of the past, they mention the importance of the salat. They say even if that person can't move at all, then they should move their eyes in the salat. What other religion in this earth talks about this? Huh? This is from the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed on us that we're Muslim. What other religion is going to tell you how you're supposed to pray when you're sick? Islam answers all avenues to help you worship your Lord. Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Allah says, I did not create mankind and the jinn except but to worship me. So because of that, our deen gives us all avenues to make sure our worship is in place in spite of whatever condition we're in. It doesn't matter. If you can't do this, no problem. There's another way you can do it. There's not a condition for a person except that it's been made easy for that person to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's the mere purpose of why Allah created us. So he says, فَإِنْ قَدَرَ أَوْ عَجَزَ فِي أَثْنَائِهَا انْتَقَلَ إِلَى الْآخَرِ. Now let's say, for example, a person is laying down, and while they're laying down, they start feeling a little bit better throughout the course of the salat. So now they can bend up and sit down, but they can't stand, so then they should bend up and sit down instead of standing. Instead of laying down. Does that make sense? If a person's laying down, they start feeling a little bit better, and they can move up to a sitting position, then that's better for them. And likewise, if a person's in a sitting condition and they start to feel a little better, then they should stand. And likewise, if a person is standing and they're not feeling well, then they should sit while they're praying. Is that clear? طيب. وإن قدر على قيام وقعودا دون ركوع سجودا أو مع بركوع قائما. So it even gets into detail. It says, if a person is able to stand and able to sit. So let's say an individual can stand and they can sit, but they can't make ruku' and they can't make sujood. What are they supposed to do? So a person can stand up and they can sit down, but they just can't, their back is messed up, right? So they can't go down into ruku' and they can't go down into sujood. What should they do?
They should stand and sit.
So they're going to tell you how to do it. This is what you do. It's easy. This is what you do. This type of situation, أو مع بركوع قائما. So then when people go into ruku', they remain standing. They just move a little bit or indicate to themselves that they're moving. And when they go into sujood, they should what?
Do the same.
No. They should sit down. While there. Let's say, for example, we're praying in the salat, and then everyone goes down into ruku'. That person that's standing, what should he do? Move slightly. Move a little teeny bit if they can. While everyone's in ruku'. When he comes up and everyone goes down into sujood, that person should do what?
Sit.
Go down into their knees and sit down. And when they come up from ruku' or from sujood, then he should move slightly back. And like this. Is that clear? And then they mentioned the issue. He said that وَلِمَرِيدٍ الصَّلَاةُ مُسْتَلْقِيًا مَعْ قُدْرَةِ عَلَى الْقِيَامِ لِمُدَاوَةٍ بِقَوْلِ طَبِيبٍ مُسْلِمًا. So there they say, well, let's say, for example, a person can stand and he can do all his functions, but by doctor's order, they should remain laying down for a particular amount of time, as this is a form of cure for whatever is wrong with that person. Let's say, for example, a person's on bed rest, or whatever the case may be, and they can't move, right?
So I want you to explain that again.
Explain what?
About the standing and
The what?
when you can't stand and sit.
If a person can stand and a person can sit, but they can't go into ruku' and they can't go into sujood. If that person can stand, but they can't go into ruku', what are they supposed to do? Oh my God. They should move slightly. While everyone is in ruku', maybe they could just move their head down slightly, whatever is easy for them, right? Then when they come up, they move their head straight back. Now, when they say Sami Allahu liman hamida rabbana wa lakal hamd, and then they go down into, when everyone else goes down into what? Sujood, that person's going to go down to their knees and not make sujood. They're just going to go down to their knees. Straight up, without going down into, they're going to move slightly, but not like everyone else. And then when everyone comes back up, then they're going to remain back up. And they're just going to make sure those movements are slightly different. The prostration and the sitting, jalsa to istiraha as it's called, the jalsa, they're going to make sure it's slightly different, inshallah. Right. So if a person can stand, they can physically stand, they can do all the motions of the salat, but according to a doctor says right now, in order to cure whatever's going on with you, you must lay down. So during the time of the Salaf, during the time of the scholars of the past, they made a condition here. They say there must be a doctor that's Muslim that makes that type of assessment. So you find that many of the ulama today, they'll say, yani, Ahlul Khibra. Ahlul Khibra are the people of knowledge in that particular field. So some say as long as that doctor is a doctor, and as long as it's really a doctor and they know their stuff, then 9 times out of 10, the doctor's not going to give you information that they don't believe is correct for you. So it says, وَلَا تَصِحُّ صَلَاتُهُ قَاعِدًا فِي السَّفِينَةِ. So now they're going to talk about another issue, about praying inside of a boat or a safina. And a person could look at that. What about airplanes? Right? So it says, لا تصح صلاته قاعدا في السفينة وهو قادر على القيام. It is not permissible to pray inside of a boat if you're able to stand. Yani, it's not permissible to pray sitting down, not pray inside of a boat. Pray sitting down inside of a boat if you're able to stand. It says it's not permissible to pray sitting down inside of a boat if you are able to stand. Now, a person might look at that and say, okay, well, the only airline that I know that allows you to stand up and offer the prayer is Saudi Airline. That's the only airline I've ever been on, and they have a musalla in the airplane. You can pray jama'ah in the airplane. Walillah alhamd. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. You'll see lines of brothers getting in line and praying in the little musalla to pray. Outside of that, obviously, well, now you definitely don't want to, you might hold the position of fear. Somebody look at you funny, what is he doing over there? Next thing you know, you're getting escorted off the airplane. Right? So nowadays you have to be careful. You have to be careful when it comes to things like that. You don't want to cause any unnecessary attention to yourself. طيب ويصح الفرض على راحلة خشية التأذي بوحل لا مرض. So also, they say that it is permissible for a person to pray. يصح الفرض على راحلة. If you recall before, we mentioned that it's not permissible to pray riding an animal, right? So, It's not permissible. Is it permissible to pray on an animal?
Not obligatory.
I said not an obligatory prayer, but a sunnah prayer you can, right? You remember that? Like, so if it's permissible to pray a sunnah prayer on a riding beast, here they say it's permissible to pray an obligatory prayer on a riding animal, if they fear that they're going to be harmed by something. What does that mean and what does that look like? What's the scenario here? Why is it permissible in one setting and then another setting is not permissible? What's going on? So the way this issue works is, the Prophet ﷺ, he prayed riding on his animal sunnah prayers. So no one here rides around on horses and camels, but we do have cars. Some brothers have people, some brothers and sisters have motorcycles, right? We have riding beasts that are not living, machinery that we use to ride around in, right? So it's permissible to pray a sunnah prayer inside of your vehicle, on your motorcycle, or whatever, on your bike or whatever. A sunnah prayer. Here, they make an exception and say the permissibility of praying an obligatory prayer on your riding animal with a condition. The condition is that you are afraid that there will be some type of harm will come your way. So the question now is, what type of harm are they talking about? So here, in this particular issue, we found that the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, what they did, an authentic hadith, انتهى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إلى مضيق هو وأصحابه. So the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, they were on their animals, and some things happened with the weather, right? It says, وَهُوَ عَلَى رَاحِلَتِهِ, and he was on his riding beast. وَالسَّمَاءُ مِنْ فَوْقِهِمْ وَبِلَّةٌ مِنْ أَسْفَلَهِ. And I guess it was raining, and on the ground that they were walking over, it was nothing but mud. There was nothing but mud and dirt on the ground, mud, in Benin, there was a lot of it, water. And so when they found the water, منهم فحضر الصلاة, then the salat came in. فأمر المؤذن, he commanded the mu'adhin to call the adhan. فأذن, and then the mu'adhin called the adhan. وأقام ثم تقدم النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وصلى بهم. And then the Prophet ﷺ came forward and he prayed with them while they were all on their what? On their riding animals. Well then, so let's say, for example, it's raining outside. Pouring down, raining, puddles, flood. You're driving in your car. You get out your car, you're going to get soaked either way you look at it. In this case, based off this hadith, it would be permissible for a person to pray in their car for that type of situation. Well then, however, we do find some people, instead of getting out of the car, they think they take this rukhsah all the time and say, I'm just going to pray in my car anyway. It's not permissible. The only time it's permissible to pray in your car around the clock is if you're praying sunnah prayers, but not the obligatory prayers. Sunnah prayers, but not the obligatory prayers. Right. And then we're going to cover this one last portion here, going into فصل في قصر المسافر الصلاة, the traveler. When can they shorten the prayer? Right.
In regards to this ruling on praying in the car, as a woman, if I'm on my way, let's say to a doctor's appointment, and the Salat is coming in, and I'm afraid to pull over on the side of the street to get out and pray because of the things that are going on now with the Muslims, and I'm not going to be out of my doctor's appointment until the next Salat is in. Can I take these things and pray in the car?
Hello. I would say that maybe in a situation like that, when you get to the doctor's office, ask them inside of there, do they have a room where you can pray at?
Okay.
That's best. And this is Philadelphia. It's Muslims everywhere. I remember one day I was driving down the street, and the salat was late, and I needed to pray Asr, and I'm like, man, I gotta hurry up and pray. And it was a traffic jam, and I was stuck. And the only way I can get off, I got off of 95, and there was a Walmart. I said, you know what? I'm gonna just go into Walmart and pray right inside the Walmart. So I went inside the Walmart to the the dressing room, and there was a lady. I said, listen, I'm Muslim and I need to pray. Let me get inside one of these rooms and pray. And she gave me the key and said, no problem. So my thing is, don't be afraid to say, listen, I need to pray. Do you guys have an area where I can just go somewhere and pray really fast? Right? You don't want to, I'm not going to say you couldn't pray in your car if you feared for your life and all of that. That's something different. As a principle in Islam, meaning even if it was impermissible, then something that is impermissible may become permissible out of necessity. Something that is originally impermissible may become permissible for you at that point in time out of necessity. However, that's not something that, in this case, you still had options, right? You still had an option, so you want to exercise all options before you fall back on that plan, and the law knows best. Now,
I think you kind of answered the question. What someone asked, if the sister's driving the school bus, can she pray on the bus?
If a sister is driving a school bus, can she pray on the bus? Well, I don't know. Can she? If you can stand up on the bus, you can put your prayer rug down on the bus, and you can pray on the bus. There's long aisles, you can pray on the bus, inshallah. The issue is not praying. The issue is this: if we had a car where you can stand up inside the car and pray, then it wouldn't be a problem. The issue is leaving off a pillar of the salat. Sister, this is what you got to understand. The issue is not about in the car, outside the car. The issue is about leaving off a pillar. The pillar of the salat is al-qiyam, standing. You cannot stand inside of a vehicle, right? In this case, inside of a school bus, perhaps you can stand in that school bus and offer the prayer. In that case, then inshallah, la ba's bi'idhnillah. طيب. فصل في قصر المسافر الصلاة. When can a traveler shorten the salah? This is a big chapter. So we're not going to finish all of this. Rather, we just want to cover about one sentence. But this one sentence is a whole lot. It says, "Man safara safaran mubahan." First of all, when people travel, there are different types of travels. Every Muslim should be familiar with traveling. If a person is traveling, then they can shorten their prayer. Are we familiar with this? Huh? But let's say, for example, we have a Muslim. He's into illegal activity, right? And he transports from Philly to DC to Baltimore, and he's doing all types of illegal activities, whatever that may be, right? Like, in this case, it would not be permissible for him to combine his salah. That Muslim, he or she, cannot use this exception that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the Muslims that are traveling. This is why when you look at the text of many of the scholars of the past, they make sure to qualify to travel as travel mubah. In any book that you read, it'll say something like, "Man safara safaran mubahan." Mubahan means it's describing the type of travel. It's a travel that is permissible, and there's no sin associated with that travel. Is that clear? Is that clear, Sheikh? Right. So then he says, when can a person qasr? When can they shorten their salat? They say arba'ata burudin. And what that means in our language, it's roughly 80, here in the US, it's roughly 84 miles. And if we were in Canada or in the UK, then it would be about 77 kilometers, roughly. 77 kilometers, and here it will be considered roughly 84 miles. Now, a person may ask, where do you get this distance from, this exact distance? Huh?
I'm only a bit confused because I believe we were in another class and they were trying to calculate in the brother and they mentioned it was like 50 miles.
50
It
something.
was like
Who said 50?
49.7 something.
I forget who it was, but
You remember?
yeah.
They were
no,
calculating
I
it.
wasn't sure, and then somebody did it on their phone.
Nah. It's about 84 miles. 84 miles, inshallah. And in kilometers, roughly 77 kilometers. But here's the issue, though. The issue is, where does this number come from? Many of the scholars in the past, there's a big debate on what is considered traveling and what isn't not considered to be traveling. We're not going to get into the whole debate about it because it's long and it's exhaustive and it's been going on for a long time. However, we find that some of the scholars of Islam, they consider traveling to be something that is understood by the order or the customs of that particular group of people where they come from. And I'll give you an example. Mecca, the city of Mecca is, let's say for example, Mecca is right here in the middle of this thing here, right? Mecca's in the middle. If we go to the right, for example, we find the city of Ta'if. You go to the right, it's a city Ta'if up in the mountains. If you go to the left, there's a city Jeddah near the ocean, near the beach, near the Red Sea, right? So right in the middle of Mecca, if you go to Jeddah, for example, many of the people in that town do not consider Jeddah to be traveling. They do not consider it to be traveling. Is it more or less? Is it more than 84 or 77 kilometers or less? It's actually a little less. In some areas and in some parts of Jeddah, it's a little more. However, the people do not consider that to be traveling in general. Whereas if you go to the right, to Ta'if, you have to go up a mountain, all the way up a mountain. But it's actually about the same distance, if not possibly shorter. Almost everyone in Mecca considers going to Ta'if to be traveling. So then the questioner will ask, what's the dhabit? A dhabit is when you hear something. Let's say, for example, this masjid is a bad masjid, this masjid is a good masjid. For example, this is what people argue about here, right? So the question is, what's the dhabit? The dhabit is, what is the determining factor that will say this masjid gets a thumbs up and this one gets a thumb down? What's the rule? Huh? What's the rule of engagement? How are we supposed to understand? Because otherwise it'll be chaos, right? So in this case, many scholars of Islam, so they have two dhabits here, two determining factors that they use to come up with the verdict. Some say it's the 77 miles, and they use this as the gauge. And some say, no, we use the customs of the people as the gauge, right? So in this case here, between Mecca and Ta'if and Mecca and Jeddah, many of the scholars in that region use the gauge of the people to determine whether or not that is traveling or not. Whether that is traveling or not. Is that clear? طيب. Sunnah lahu qasru ruba'iyya rak'atain. Is sunnah for that person that is traveling to shorten the ruba'iyya. Ruba'iyya are salawat that have 4 raka'at to them. So for example, we have dhuhr, we have asr, and we have isha. Those 3 prayers can be shortened. Question. If you're traveling, let's say right now we're leaving to go travel. Leaving out of the city, we packed up the car, we're driving. when can we actually start shortening our prayer?
What do we have?
Let's say right now, we're here, Isha didn't come in yet. Right? And when we get in the car and we start driving, we're still in the city, we're, going through traffic. Isha comes in while we're in the car, still in the city. Can we shorten the prayer?
Yeah, after that 84 months.
After the 84 miles. So you say after the 84 miles, even though our intention is to travel.
No, I think you still consider it as a traveler.
The question is, when do you consider yourself a traveler? Listen to what I'm saying. Let's make it even easier. Right now, it's Saturday afternoon. Dhuhr comes in, and we're still in Philly, and we're loading up the car. Can we shorten and combine the salat before we leave? You can combine them, but you can't shorten them. Can you shorten Dhuhr? So you can't shorten Dhuhr and you can't shorten Asr as long as you're still there, even though your intention is to leave and the car is packed up, ready to go.
You said Dhuhr came in before you left?
Yeah, Dhuhr came in before you left.
No.
Is the scenario clear?
No. So you prayed Dhuhr.
You didn't pray Dhuhr yet. Dhuhr just came in.
If it came in, then you pray it before you leave.
Can I shorten it?
Nah.
So when can I shorten it?
If you're already in the act of traveling.
All right, so say now Dhuhr came in and everyone's in the car. The family's in the car, kids in the back, everyone's strapped in and we're driving. And Dhuhr comes in right then and there. Can I pull over and shorten the salat?
Yeah,
Dhuhr and Asr?
your intentions was already traveling.
Yeah, my intention is traveling.
So
So can I shorten?
Yes.
I can.
Yes.
That's your minhaj?
Yes.
Okay.
I ain't gonna say that. No.
That's your.
Set me up with that. No.
What about you, Sheikh? We'll come back.
Nah.
What about you? Okay.
Because if you have the ability to stop, pull over, and you still within the 84 miles, then
Oh, yeah.
I think it's your intentions.
So it's the intentions.
That's what I'm thinking.
That's what you think.
Yes.
So what do you do?
I wasn't in that position.
Right. Labats. Right. So, the ulama, they mention, إِذَا فَارَقَ عَامِرَ قَرِيَتِهِ. The only time you can start shortening your prayer when you're traveling is when you leave outside of your town. What does that mean? Let's say, for example, here in Philly, we're going to DC, right? We're driving, and we leave the city right outside the airport. You see the city behind us, and we're going into Chester. Then you can start shortening your salat. However, if, and this is a mistake that I didn't know until we actually had the opportunity to travel with one of the mashayikh. We were traveling with one of the mashayikh from Mecca to Medina. We were all together in the car, and Dhuhr came in. They called the adhan for Dhuhr, and we're in the car, still in Mecca, and we left Mecca. And by the time we got to Medina, I'm thinking we're going to shorten Dhuhr and Asr, combine, so on and so forth. Sheikh, the first thing the Sheikh asked was, did they call the adhan? Were we in Mecca when they called the adhan? I said, yes. He said, well, if we were in Mecca when they called the adhan, then we have to atem, meaning we have to pray 4 raka'at for Dhuhr. Because the salat came in when we were still stationary. In other words, in our place of origin. So if you're in your place of origin and the salat comes in, then you have to pray the full salat. You can't shorten it. The only time you can begin to shorten the salat is if what? The city is in your background.
now with that being said, is it still permissible to delay and combine it and pray with Asr, although you're not shortening it?
I'm telling you what I did. This is what happened with us. When we were traveling with one of the mashayikh, we were in Mecca. The adhan came in for Dhuhr. We didn't pray. We left with the intentions of traveling. By the time we got to halfway to Medina, we had to pray Asr. Asr was in, So we prayed Dhuhr 4 raka'at, and then we prayed Asr 2 raka'at. Wadah?
Yeah.
Now, if we would have left Mecca and they called the adhan when Mecca was behind us, then we could have prayed 2 raka'at for Dhuhr and 2 raka'at for Asr. Does that make sense? Play.
But you were in the car when the adhan for Dhuhr.
It didn't matter whether I was in the car or standing outside the car. As long as I was in Mecca, the issue was in the city. It has nothing to do with being in the car.
No, but I mean, I'm not talking about with regard to shortening it. I'm talking about with regard to when you should pray it. Like, if you're not in the car, then, I mean...
Yeah, we were actually in the car traveling. But what I'm saying to you is it's not about whether we was in the car or out the car. The thing is we were on the road. We were getting ready to get on the road to travel. Well, there. So we're going to stop right there, inshallah, because what's after that, it gets into a lot of details. And I'm even debating, like, man, do I even want to go through that? There's going to be a lot of questions. But any of it, we'll stop with that. Any questions about what we went over so far?
Yeah, just for clarity on that last question still.
Okay.
Does the ruling for shortening still take the same ruling for combining?
We're going to talk about combining in another class. But I don't understand what you mean by that question. What do you mean?
Like for example, when you travel, right?
Anytime you can shorten a salat, do you combine? Is that what you're saying?
Right, or that particular ruling, does it still, or for say, you still in the city, but you, all right, let's say you still in the city, but you in the car. Is it, do you have to stop, or can you just continue your travel, and then you combine them when you go, but you still have to make 4 rakat?
Yeah.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. But the next issue, well, let's say, for example, I just want to mention it again, just make sure we understand. If you're in your hometown, meaning your place of origin, and the adhan comes in and you don't, let's say the adhan comes in. No, let's say as soon as you go outside the city towards Chester, and the adhan for Dhuhr comes in. Philly and Chester is very close, right outside of the city. You can pull over, or Foldcroft, that's right by the airport. You go over there, it's outside the city, you pull over, the adhan just came in, you can pray Dhuhr and Asr combined because you're in the beginning of your travel. Well, they 2 rak'ah for each. Is that clear? And then inshallah ta'ala, we're going to talk about that in more detail in the next or the following, or the classes that come next, inshallah ta'ala. Huh? Any other questions? Any questions online?
I have a question.
No, tafadhal.
So, I'm traveling from, let's say, Mississippi back here.
What you saying?
And
Traveling from where?
I'm here for like a month. At what point am I no longer traveling, or longer?
Like, if you are traveling to a particular town, and you, let's say, there are 2 cases here. In one case, you know how long you're going to be there, and in another case, you don't know how long you're going to be there. Assuming that you are traveling to a particular place and you know you're going to be there for 10 days, they say that you should attempt, meaning you should pray your full salawat anytime you know you're going to be at a place longer than 4 days. Longer than 4 days. And we're going to cover that in the next few classes. And let's say, for example, you're in a place, there's just something that happened one time. I know a brother that was on a cruise. He went on a cruise. And they were supposed to be at a particular place for a few days. They wound up staying longer than that. Anytime you go to a place and you wind up staying there longer than you anticipated, and you're not sure when you're going to leave, in this case, you can what? You can always shorten your salah. As some of the ulama say, al-abad. Al-abad means forever. As long as you don't know when you're leaving and you're planning on leaving, then you can shorten your salah. And we'll talk about that, inshallah, in the next class. We're going to talk about that in a lot more detail, inshallah ta'ala. Any other questions? Online? We're good.
No, it's nothing else online.
Hmm?
Nothing else online.
Right. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.